The aim of this course is to learn how to do research in management science, which will be useful to write the master thesis. We'll shortly see how to write a master thesis. We'll see shortly what is science in management, and then we'll switch to topics like how to find a research topic, where to find a research topic. You know that the most important part of research is to give a contribution. The idea is how to find a topic that brings a theoretical managerial contribution, and perhaps even we'll see how to do a literature review. This is actually what you have already done also for your technology acceptance model project. It's actually the same procedure. We'll see the structure of the master thesis, how to develop research design, which might be qualitative or quantitative, and conclude on formal aspects, because the master thesis is not only a proof of you, because you're at the end of your university master studies, it's also a formal exercise, which means that you have to write correctly in good English. So proofreading is very important, but it's also a question of form. You need a good format in the document should be clean in terms of language exigences, but also clean in terms of visual attract. Document is it's a cornerstone, the last cornerstone in your life at the university. Something which stays, and so it's important that you give us a very clean document, because this document stays here in the library. Which brings me also to ethical questions such as plagiarism. We start with, what is research for you? Do you already have an idea about a topic? Start about the philosophy of science and views how science is seen today. And this view, or these views, determine actually the methodology you will use. Qualitative methodology, quantitative methodology, or both. Today, most researchers in management science use mostly both approaches, qualitative and quantitative. So, let's start with a question. What comes first? Theory or research? Research? Why?
Because you made research about things, and then you apply theory to it, and then you made research again.
Okay, now that's a good point, yeah?
I would say theory because you base your research on theory. So you read about it, you find out where the research lacks, like where is missing information, whatever, and then you base your research question on it and start your research.
Okay, good point. What do you think? Who's right?
Nobody.
Nobody?
Everyone got his answer.
I would say you're both right, because actually you stated two types of research approaches. Some researchers think that you first research, and then with research you will determine it as theory. Other researchers think that it's more important to have a theory, and then you do research to confirm. Both point of views are right, and it depends on the context of the research you want to do. So let's have a closer look. That is, should we take a theory and then test them? This is called a deductive or positive reasoning, or should we find some empirical evidence, so do research first, and then work out the theory, which is called inductive reasoning, or also relative. This is summarized here. If you have a good established theory and literature, you start actually with the theory, you establish your hypothesis, and you observe your doing empirical investigation, from which you draw your generalization, and you confirm your theory. This is actually called hypothetic or deductive research. It's also called positivist research, and this is actually the most used research approach in management science. Of course, used a lot in economy. Management science, it's a subdiscipline of economics. It's still most management journals, including market journals, prefer this positivist approach or hypothetic deductive approach. You did it actually for your technology acceptance model. You're clearly positioned in this paradigm, and it's still preferred by most journals. The other approach is you might start from observations. It's called inductive and not deductive approach. from the observations you try to generalize, and you establish a theory. And once you have done that, you might switch to a deductive approach and establish hypotheses to confirm your theory, and to do a quantitative, larger sample design which confirms your theory. Topics where we don't know a lot, where literature is scarce, where theory is scarce, we don't have an established theory. In these domains, qualitative research is rather recommended. Because this means that you have to establish a theory, and this is generally done by qualitative research. Means that you're not working with representative samplings, big samples, like you did for your technology acceptance model, but generally you work with focus groups or individual interviews. On the other hand, if you have established theory, then actually you don't need to go deep in the topic, because you have established theories, which you can use. For example, technology acceptance theory is based on the theory of reasoned action. So we have a lot of theories in social science, management science, and marketing science, and coming from economics, which can be used to test them. And that is why the mainstream in management science and marketing science use established theory and be tested with hypotheses. So hypotheses means which are closed, very precise research questions to which you can give an answer very precisely with statistical tests. That is what you use, for example, regression, ANOVA, correlation analysis, all these tests, or hypo-t-tests, or mean tests, all these tests are quantitative tools which are used in a hypothetic deductive approach, and you either validate, confirm a hypothesis, or you reject it, which is very precise. So this is on the deductive side. On the other hand, on the inductive side, you don't establish hypotheses. You establish very open research questions, because you don't know a lot about the topic. So you cannot test it. You cannot ask very precise questions with measurement scales, like you do in a positive deductive approach. So we have open research questions to which to try to give an answer by digging very deeply into the topic, by doing qualitative focus groups or individual interviews. And you have no statistical test to validate, because generally you're working with small samples, 10, 15, 20 people. You survey, but not with a 10 or 15 minutes questionnaire. It's in-depth interviews, and you record the data or the interviews, and then you have to analyze it with also software tools, but it's kind of text analysis here. So today you have quantitative tools that can analyze very big text through text mining in order to give you feedback or input on the topic. But this is qualitative research. Again, it's not about what is better or better. There are contexts where qualitative research fits better. For example, if you work on very new topics, if you take the example about IoT, there was very few literature, so we started to do qualitative research in order to understand what are the acceptance factors for IoT or smart objects. Artificial intelligence and autonomous cars. There's very few literature, or most literature comes from engineering science about technologies, but not about social acceptance factors and trust and all these social concepts. It is adequate to start with qualitative research in order to know more about how consumers perceive AI and autonomous cars. And above all, most of us don't really know what is AI and how autonomous cars work. So if you do a questionnaire, and that is probably the main limit also with our study about autonomous cars and the smart home, because most of the customers, and probably during your surveys, you saw that some customers perhaps struggled with the different concepts because we are not really familiar with these technologies yet. And therefore, it would make sense to start with a qualitative research, to dig deeper into this topic and to survey customers more deeply about what they think about these technologies. So, in summary, in deductive approach, theory comes first and is tested. In inductive approach, research comes first in order to establish theory. Most PhDs today are done with both. Generally, students start with a qualitative research, and even we, as confirmed researchers, we often start with a qualitative design in order to have a first idea about the topic, and then the more we know about the topic, the more we find theories, the more we go over to a deductive approach, with a more hypothetic reductive approach, where we have closed research questions called hypotheses, which we then test statistically with larger samples, representative samples, because the aim of science is generalization. We want to generalize our results to other domains, which is mostly the main limits, because as you have seen, you've read research articles, there are also always limits. And one of the main limits is that our research is often not representative. We use convenience samples, student samples, we use samples from France, from Thailand, from China, but can we transpose the results from Chinese populations to the European populations? Probably not, because there are cultural barriers which we cannot control, and that is why it's important to do replications again. So test, retest, and we are always testing in order to establish a good theory. Be afraid if you do a qualitative research. It does not mean that qualitative is bad. We have more and more now PhDs based only also on qualitative research. It's a science, it's very scientific. There are methods, but this means that you have to acquire methodology. Now we have a scientific corpus of methods which can be used. Now we have even statistical tools with R. You have statistical software tools, for example, in vivo, Sphinx, which are tools which you can use to do text mining or to analyze focus groups or in-depth interviews.
So in summary, quantitative research is applied for confirmatory research if the research question is narrowly defined and profound knowledge theory is available. Whereas qualitative research is more exploratory when the research question is not defined and little knowledge is available. For quantitative research, theories are tested. It's a deductive approach with testing theory and hypothesis. It's a causal, explanative approach with investigation that tests causality between variable x, which is the reason for the change of variable y. Whereas for qualitative research, induction is done without hypothesis. Theory becomes the endpoint in the inductive approach. Qualitative research is causal, focuses on spatio-temporal independent causal law statements, which needs replications, which is not applicable to qualitative research. The sample for quantitative research is representative or should be representative for the population and is drawn from the sample, whereas qualitative research is done with a non-representative sample, focus groups or smaller in-depth interviews. And finally, the generalizability of results for quantitative research might be spatio-temporal independent, so the results should be valid for the population, no matter if the study is done in Germany, France, Great Britain, US, or any other country, and should be independent of time. So if we replicate a study, it should hold in these different countries. There should be identical results if the measurement is replicated under the same conditions with an objective systemization of regularities and empirical generalization through replication to establish social laws. So it's a deductive approach where the generalization comes from general inferences or observations to individual observations. For example, if in a representative German sample of different German lakes all swans are white, then the swans must also be white in the Lake of Constance. So we generalize from general inferences or observations from different lakes to an individual observation, that is the Lake of Constance. Which is not the case for qualitative research because the results are not valid for the entire population. That is why we're talking about inductive approaches. The generalizations come from individual inferences or observations, and we come then to general observations. For example, if in a representative German sample of swans, in one German lake all swans are white, then the swans in all German lakes must be white. And so we come from an individual result and try to draw the general observations from the individual result.